Welcome into the very first edition of this new show that is all about Ohio State football. I am Cole McDaniel. Obviously, you know me as the vice president of Keon Sports. And of course, this fall, you hear me as the play-by-play voice of the high school football game of the week as well on the YouTube channel. If you're watching this right now and you haven't hit subscribe on that YouTube channel, make sure you do so. But I want to remind everybody that Cole's Corner, of course, every year you see things about prospect rankings going up. Well, you also see the articles online about Cole's Corner and talking about those prospect rankings when it comes to the NFL draft, some other things that I do as well. Special news show, and you see from the title here, I'm calling it Cole's Buckeye Corner. That's right, because it's just strictly about the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm excited each and every single week to talk about the upcoming game, my prediction, what do I expect to happen, and give you a couple little updates about the Ohio State Buckeyes, and I'll also give you a little preview of a couple other games that are must-watches every single week in college football. Also want to give a shout out to Hinckley Roofing, sponsor of this show. If you need to do any repairs to your roof, full replacement, anything along those lines, make sure you reach out to Hinckley Roofing. They're some of the best out there. Give them a call, or you can go to Hinckley Roofing online. Make sure you check out their website. That being said, I want to dive right in, and I was so tempted, and I had talked to a few people about what I wanted to say here in this first episode, and was joking that I might as well just come in hot with an extremely hot take, right? This is sponsored by a roofing company, right? So I could get really crazy and talk about putting a roof on the horseshoe. Now, that's not going to happen, right? They're not going to do it. But for years, Ohio State has been a team that's so focused on passing, right? They're a pass-heavy team. A lot of that changed around the time of when Dwayne Haskins was the starting quarterback. They were really airing it out. Felt like they still did that a lot with Justin Fields. They did it with C.J. Stroud, and I think the trend is going to continue, especially with Ryan Day as the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. So everybody's talking about this expanded college football playoff coming up and talking about how what if some of these Southern teams, SEC teams, and maybe ACC, some of these teams have to go to play against Ohio State in the shoe during the winter. Is that an advantage? I'd argue not much of an advantage. Why? Because Ohio State wants to air it out, and they seem to perform almost better in a dome than when it gets to that cold weather into the season. So, I don't know. I mean, I would love to see the Ohio State Buckeyes get to play in a dome a little bit more. They're not going to do anything with the shoe. The shoe's an iconic stadium. It's a great stadium. But jokingly, I would love to see like a retractable roof on that stadium, but of course, they can't just add that on the shoe, especially with the shape. They'd have to completely redo the whole thing, which would have a lot of people up in arms. So we'll move off of what could be a very controversial topic here, and we'll go on to the next thing, which also could be a very controversial topic as well, but it's very fitting because it's been the talk of the offseason for the Ohio State Buckeyes. That is the QB battle between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord. Now, I think most people who maybe aren't as in-depth with the Ohio State recruiting, they think that Kyle McCord is just the heir to the really throne at the quarterback position for Ohio State. I would have disagreed with that last year, disagreed with that now. I've been on the same page for a while. Just because Kyle McCord was the backup to C.J. Stroud last year doesn't mean that Devin Brown isn't going to be the better quarterback throughout his college career and actually have more potential for being a star in the NFL. And that is why I am on the Devin Brown train. Now, do I necessarily like the number 33 at quarterback? No, not particularly. It reminds me a lot of Devin Gardner wearing 98 as the Michigan quarterback, and that just looked bad, right? Looked bad out there on the field. Same equivalent as Teddy Bridgewater in preseason here for the Lions, wearing number 50. Right? It's not a normal quarterback number. It looks weird out there on the field, but Devin Brown, regardless of the number, is the better quarterback. He's more mobile. He has more zip on his passes. Kyle McCord was a 5-star quarterback for a reason. He's a good player, right? But he also had Marvin Harrison Jr. he was throwing to in high school, which certainly helped him out because Marvin Harrison Jr. is a guy who is going to be part of that group where you see that Legends book. He's a guy that if a volume 3 then comes out, you would probably see him in it in the next couple of years. That being said, McCord's a good player. Has a lot of ability. He's a guy who isn't going to be able to go anywhere this year, but if Devin Brown wins that job officially, you'll see Kyle McCord likely transfer off. He'll probably do well in college. I don't see him as much more than maybe a backup in the NFL, whereas Devin Brown has the ability to, I think, take it to another level and potentially start. And this could be a lot like that Dwayne Haskins, Joe Burrow situation. It's a little different because Joe Burrow had his injury, right? He was injured in the spring, and Dwayne Haskins went out there and performed well and truly beat Joe Burrow out. And of course, sad to talk about Dwayne Haskins, of course, because of the loss of him, and everybody is remembering Dwayne Haskins the past year or so since that tragic loss of him. But Haskins performed very well at Ohio State, don't get me wrong. But he was a pocket passer, aired it out, threw for a ton of yards. Joe Burrow went off to LSU. First season, looked okay. There was a lot of potential. It wasn't until his second year of starting that he went off. He was on a whole nother level, and of course you know what he is in the NFL, and that's how I feel about this. If really Ohio State doesn't take advantage of Devin Brown, and this could be like a Joe Burrow situation where he'd go off, just absolutely destroy everybody at the college level, and then go off to the pros and be that top tier guy. I think if it's so neck and neck, go with the guy who has the higher ceiling, because Kyle McCord has not fully secured that job. So that's why I think Devin Brown should be this guy who should be starting this year. But rumor is this coming weekend for this game against Indiana, and I'm about to touch on that as well, you're going to see both quarterbacks out there on the field. But the last thing I want to see is a JT Barrett, Cardale Jones type of situation where one starts the game and then they switch at halftime. Neither quarterback was able to get into a rhythm that year. That will have to end quickly. You can really only probably play those two quarterbacks week 1 and make your decision after that and stick to your guns, whoever you choose. Now, I do want to touch on the defense really quick. The defense had some improvements, I think, last year with Jim Knowles, but it wasn't good enough, especially in that game against the team up north, right? Part of the problem might have been that jack position and how it was being used, and probably who was the jack last year. And it was none other than Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer was a guy who spent some time at that jack spot. Jack Sawyer is a guy who needs his hand in the dirt, right? He's a true defensive end. If you can put him opposite of JT Tuimoloau, he could go to work and do some damage. And Jack Sawyer is probably underperformed, but likely because he's a bigger, strong guy who probably shouldn't be standing up there. So they're putting Jack Sawyer down on the line of scrimmage from everything that I've heard. I'm going to like to see him go to work with that hand in the dirt opposite of Tuimoloau, wreak some havoc. For that jack position, a guy like CJ Hicks can spend some time there. You have linebackers, true linebackers that can play that spot. It might make it a whole lot better, but I love that it should be 2 down defensive ends on the field typically for that defense, which should be a huge improvement. Hopefully it can limit the jack spot, which thought might work out last year, but there were certainly some issues. It was not seamless at all. Now, turning to this game, I think the defense is going to perform well, right? I think that change, along with some of the experience they have on the roster, Sonny Styles, I think he's going to be impressive. CJ Hicks, he's going to be impressive. And then you know about a lot of the other names out there. Tommy Eichenberg, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Mike Hall, Lathan Ransom. I can run down the list, and I think there's a lot of good things on that defensive side. But some of the fresh faces that you really didn't see much of last year, but you knew they had the freak athleticism in CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles, will be great to see them out there on the field, and they should get a ton of snaps. Defense should perform well, like I said. It's the offense that will be the question. Wide receiver room, loaded. Running backs, if healthy, Henderson, Williams, good 1-2 punch, and they have other good backups after that, as with Dallin Hayden and some others. My question, of course, is at that quarterback spot. Who is going to actually step up perform well. And I think there's going to be bumps in the road for both because apparently there's been the lack of consistency. And if both are maybe getting some first team reps, and it has seemed like Devin Brown, it might actually, as this is stringing out, lean his way a little bit more, which I'm happy about. That being said, it's tough to have two guys in the game for possibly extended periods of time when it comes to a competitive game opening the season, week one, when there's going to be some mistakes. It's not going to be flawless, and you're going up a Big Ten opponent. This is a conference game. This isn't non-conference. So that's where some of the concerns come to play. Ohio State might be favored against Indiana on the road by 30 points, but I don't think they're going to put up their typical 40-plus, 50-plus points in some of those early season games like we see. I think they're going to actually get stopped a little bit more by Indiana, maybe some turnovers, some interceptions coming by way of either McCord or Brown, regardless, one of those guys because of the competition. So I'm going to say Ohio State, they take this one, 38-13 against Indiana. Get that first win on the season. Not all going to be pretty, not going to be seamless, but you go 1-0 overall. You go 1-0 in conference play, and that's how it starts off. Now, this first show might be a little bit longer than others. A lot of times going to be maybe about 10-15 minutes breaking down what you can see in this upcoming game, but of course touching on a couple notes that I'm looking forward to this season. But I'm going to end every single show, each and every single week, talking about 3 other games that are must-watches in addition to that Ohio State game. This week, the other 3, it's the Battle of Miami. Will the real Miami please stand up on Friday night at 7 o'clock? Make sure you're actually watching the Keon Sports High School Football Game of the Week. We'll be there at North Royalton as North Royalton hosts North Ridgeville, the Rangers. But if you want to have on one TV a college game and you want to on your laptop have the Keon Sports Game of the Week pulled up, again, you can double dip here because Miami of Ohio travels down to face off against Miami, Florida. Miami, Florida, of course, heavy favorites there, but can Miami, Ohio play them tough, make some noise, because they want to say that they're the better Miami. A little bit of bragging rights there. Then on Saturday, my second must-watch game, a nightcap. That's number 21 North Carolina versus South Carolina in Duke's Mayo Classic at Bank of America Stadium. That one could be a fun one because even though North Carolina is the ranked team, Spencer Rattler has a chance this year to step up, take his game to another level. He really slipped off the radar a little bit since he left Oklahoma. Had some good moments last year with South Carolina. Now, can he get back to being a much talked about quarterback when it comes to being a prospect for the NFL the next few years? That is where we will wait and see on that. But he's got a true test in this opening matchup. I'm going to say that could be a fun one. And even though North Carolina is the favorite, I think South Carolina is going to make this thing really interesting. May very well pull off that win there to open the season. And then my third and final must-watch game this week, it's a no-brainer. Number 5 LSU versus number 8 Florida State. That's on Sunday at 7:30. No pro football until next weekend. So this coming weekend, how about you spend your Sunday watching that LSU-Florida State matchup? It should be a fun one. I'm going to have to say that I'm probably leaning LSU on that one. But you never know what happens in week 1. Things can get crazy. Both teams trying to settle in. Expect something interesting. That being said, going to wrap up this week. Want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching this every single week. Like I said, another episode of Cole's Buckeye Corner is going to go up here on the YouTube channel. Again, if you want a quick 10, 15-minute show talking about what you can expect, make sure you tune in every single week. And again, a shout out to Hinckley Roofing, sponsor of this show. If you need anything done with replacing a roof, repairing a roof, anything, make sure you reach out to them. Some of the best in the biz when it comes to your roofing needs. For myself, Cole McDaniel, want to thank everybody once again for watching and listening. Make sure you hit the subscribe button.